Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Unfiltered Tea. We are here tonight. We are a day late. We're an hour later than we usually do. The get together. Mercury is going direct like now, which of course means I won't be able to speak properly because, you know, that's how we roll up in here. Um, how are you? How has your week how has your Monday been? Hopefully you had a nice easy start to the week. Um and let's see. What are we going to be talking? Well, you know what? Tonight is going to be somewhat informal. So here's the thing. At some point there's going to be memberships on this channel at some point down the road. And when we get to that point, there will be members only lives that we do. And so tonight that's kind of where I'm at. So take in the sneak peek while it's here, cuz that's kind of what I'm thinking of this evening. Um I was going to talk about some other stuff, but then, everybody is focused on this. And there are a few things that have come up since we all were here together last week. So we're going to go through some of those. We might have a little story time. I might tell you some of the odd little rabbit holes I've gone down on the side of all of this. And yeah, that's where we're at. So with everything, and before I'm gonna forget if I don't do this now, I, I might remember later, but we won't plan on that. So if you're here with me, do all the, YouTube things, do the liking, subscribing, sharing if you enjoy this. And that helps the YouTube computer brain get this in front of other people who might enjoy it as well. So it helps. Thank you for that. I had something else and then my brain interrupted itself, as it does, as it does. Do you ever have that? My brain interrupts itself sometimes, and then it's super fun trying to get back on track. Um, so yeah, I guess that is me making notes because it was welcome and housekeeping because here's the thing. I have surgery coming up um this Friday. So I have absolutely no idea how I am going to feel on Sunday. If I am bored out of my mind and feel like sitting in this chair and hanging out with everybody and going over the week as it is, we're going to do that. If I need sleep, I'm going to do that. So that's that's where we're at. So keep a lookout. I'm sure I will be on the socials at some point because I'm don't foresee a lot of extraneous movement right afterwards. Um so we will do that. So keep a lookout on the socials. I will post here if I have decided not to do a show next week. We're just gonna see how I'm feeling and if I can pour myself into a chair and pull up some things, or if something super interesting happens, we will do that. In the meantime, I think what I'm gonna do is say welcome, tell me where you're coming in from, what you're sipping on, what you're snacking on, if you're snacking instead of sipping. Um, and hopefully all of the weather is not terrible where you are. It's good here. It's spring, it's gray, it's whatever. But yes. Let's roll the intro and let's take a look at what the agenda is for tonight cuz I have a plan, but we can get sidetracked tonight. We don't have to get through everything tonight if we don't want to. We can have our squirrel moment. So, with that, welcome. I'm going to roll the intro. We'll get into it. Hello and welcome to the Unfiltered Tea, a show where we say all the things you wish the newscasters said, unscripted and unfiltered. We talk about politics, pop culture, and courts, so pull up your soapbox, pour yourself a cuppa, and let's go. Let's go. Okay. Also, with the audio, I have everything changed around because video and stuff like that. If it is wonky, chat is amazing and will let me know. Because you guys are awesome and I appreciate that. So, okay. What happened since last week? So a lot happened since last week because of course it did, because it is maybe the most bizarre trial anybody has ever been watching ever. And I count a lot of things into that. We might do a story time in a minute for how I got into watching trials. Let me know if you want that story time and we will squirrel and go down that rabbit hole. Um so there was an audit done of the Canton Police Department, and that report is now out. From what I have gathered and understood, this was an audit where the members of the town got together and said, "Can we look at how this investigation went down and maybe maybe take a look at it?" So that report is out. They did do public questions and comments, well, mostly questions on Saturday. Pardon me. And that is available. I've not pulled that video up tonight because I got through most of it. Um, Honestly, most of the information we're looking at is in the report, and the town, from the questions that I saw of the town is still feels like there needs to be more done. And I think they're probably correct on that. My own personal feelings, I feel like they are probably correct on that. So that happened. There is a lawsuit that I also do not have the document here, but I thought we might chat about that a little bit because there is a lawsuit about the judge, where Judge Canoni is named in the lawsuit, and it is about the buffer zone. So, what has been happening with this trial in particular is sorry, again, brain interrupted itself and I sidetracked. What has been happening with this trial is you've got the free Karen Reed folks who think that she has been charged unjustly and that justice is not being done for John O'Keefe with this trial. Based on what I saw in trial number one, I tend to think they're probably right. And that is based on the evidence that was brought into trial number one. I don't know if trial number two is going to change my mind. And then on the other side of that, you have the uh, blue line justice for John O'Keefe, Karen Reid is guilty protesters as well. It's Boston, so quiet isn't really how they roll or how we roll up here in New England in general. So, um, that has been causing some issues because what the judge is trying to do is ensure a fair trial, which means if the jury is hearing these protest chants, there is a fear that that is, well, going to affect their deliberations and their decision. And I understand that desire to protect the court. Looking at some of the images of the new buffer zone, I also understand why a lawsuit has been brought because it, of course, also gets into this uh, objectively, just from a legal standpoint, fascinating argument. Um, oh, wait. Dad says, wait, isn't it Canton? Right, it's Boston. It's Canton and the Boston PD. Canton is its own town, but there is a lot of overlap because of its proximity to Boston. I don't know if that it's so yeah. Um, so this is happening in Canton. Thank you, Dad, for that. This is happening in Canton. The buffer zone is around the Canton courthouse, but it has now been extended. It was for trial number 1, a 200-foot buffer zone. Now it has been extended because it got noisy. And, um yes, that's the same culture. Exactly, exactly, and especially when you're dealing with the police department, that entire area. There's Boston, and then there's a whole lot of the surrounding areas and of Boston in Massachusetts where it all gets intermingled. That is a whole, like, Whitey Bulger Irish mafia rabbit hole we could go down if we want to tonight. Is it a thread that I have pulled a bit of? Mhm. Mhm. Because I'm curious. Also, fun fact, I apparently lived in a neighborhood run by the Italian friends of the mafia that Whitey Bulger ran for a while, if I read the Wikipedia page correctly. Totally different thing. Back to wait, hang on. I have to think. I have to think. We might do a lot of these tonight. Squirrel. Um, so with the buffer zone, it is now much bigger, and the lawsuit is based on this constitutional First Amendment. You have the right to protest, you have the right to free speech. Where does that clash with the just as constitutional right to a free and fair trial? Are we going to see this play out probably more dramatically than we might in other cases? I'm gonna go with yes, because nothing about this trial has any chill. Not the first one. Well, Lally. Lally had a little too much chill in trial number 1, but yeah. So we are back to that. So I am going to be interested to see how that all plays out, where um the rights are all, I'm trying to find the right words to say this, right? The rights are all constitutional, therefore they are all sort of foundation and bedrock. Where do they clash, and what can be done to make sure that everybody's rights are protected? I personally am of the, if there's a back door that the jury can come in, that would be something to consider, because remember with the Depp Heard trial, there were tons of people outside of that courthouse every single day, and so they knew that was gonna happen, so the workaround was to get everybody in through a back door or a side door. Is that possible? I don't know. These courtroom buildings seem to be, like, 300 years old, so there probably isn't a good back door for that, but it would be something that I would be curious to see if there was, because I feel like that would probably be the easiest, and then just ask people to keep it down. You can still have your signs, but I don't think shouting while court is in session does anybody any good. That's my own personal soapbox opinion on that. So, that those are the things that happened this week. I do have the audit pulled up if we want to look at some parts of it, but I'll be honest with you, I have not run through it. I've just watched, my favorites go through it or take a first look at it. They have some really good recommendations in there. I think more needs to be done. That is, again, my own personal opinion. I'd like to go back and look at that again. Um, what we can do now is I should swoop and then What I think we ought to do, because I think it's very fascinating, jury selection is one of those parts of court that we don't often get to see. I should swoop before I go into this because I need to timestamp things at some point so that when you come across this later, that you can skip to the parts that you really like. Okay. So, jury selection is one of those things that I find endlessly fascinating. I myself have never been summoned to jury duty. I don't know why. At this point, I don't know as they would have me on a jury. I work at a law firm, and I mean, I'm not a lawyer. Let's get that out of the way. I am law adjacent, but I am by no means. Oh, no, far from it. I don't do any of that stuff. Um, I am support. That is what I am. But working at a law firm can sometimes get you kicked out of jury selection. And I follow a lot of lawyers on YouTube, obviously. So there's that. I would be fascinated to sit on a jury. I would probably end up with a case that would make me bored to tears, but who knows? Anyway, I've never been on the jury summoned side of things. So I find this part just immensely fascinating. And I appreciate that what they have been doing is streaming the part of this that you can stream. You will notice when I pull up the video, you will not see or hear any potential jurors. And that is because if you are called to jury duty, you are protected. It is a civic duty in most jurisdictions and in most jobs. It can be an extreme financial hardship to sit on jury duty. Is there a stipend? Yes. Is it much? No. Um, and so getting the right jury, you have to have people who can sit for it. You can have to have people who can't do their regular job while they are on this jury. And you have to have people who can be fair and impartial, which we would all like to think that we can be. But it's harder, especially in a case like this that has been so public and out in the, just out over the airwaves now for 2+ years. It's much harder to find a local jury that hasn't heard of this. But I find the initial select, are they going to be able to? Absolutely. They are hunting for 16 jurors, 12 will deliberate. There will be 4 alternates because things come up throughout trial. And so that is the aim. As of 2 hours ago tonight, when I checked, they have sat 10. That number can, from what everybody tells me, fluctuate from now until they get all 16 and swear them in. Oh, that is the other thing that I have heard has happened because the swearing in, it made me think of it. I believe Karen Reed's now defense team that rivals the numbers of the Avengers is has put a petition to the Supreme Court of the United States to go over this double jeopardy issue. As I understand it, again, I would need an attorney to walk me through this, but as I understand it, if the judge had quite simply just pulled the jurors at the end of at the end when she declared the mistrial, we wouldn't be here. But we are. So yeah, I don't understand why she didn't do that. It doesn't get into deliberations if you're like, "Hey, did you have a verdict on count 1?" If you get every juror saying yes, then it's no, you go back in and you write that down. If you missed the first trial, the jury instructions were incredibly confusing. So I get why it got to where it is. But one of the other reasons that I want to pull this up is because the video that we have watched on this channel so far has shown attorneys and the judge in the courtroom with each other. No jury. Guess who gets to decide the case? The jury. So when you are dealing with questioning jurors and things like that, the demeanor of absolutely everyone is different. And so I got my timestamps so we don't have to listen to all of the witness names being read and stuff like that. But I did want to pull this up so that we can see, because I like this judge when she's talking to the jury. She is very, very good with the jury. And I like how she explains things, and I like how she describes things at this front end. I still have a whole lot of issues with her rulings, but that's the thing. Everything we know so far, this jury does not know and will not know. So some of the witnesses we've discussed, that's all been decided in the motions. They aren't necessarily going to be a factor in this. So this is where it's going to get tough for somebody like me, who has formed opinions and has formed thoughts, and I'm gonna get mad at certain things. It's gonna be harder for me to set aside the things I already know, because I already know that they're already in my head, you know? So let us pull this up and nope, do that. No, that. StreamYard changed things and then confused me, and yeah, that. Share. I'm gonna make myself a little well, I don't know if I actually need to make myself that much smaller. It's well, I'll unsmallen for introductions. Before I click play on this, and I did get it back to the hear use because that's just fun. Um, I think the audio on this one is fine. Buffering, buffering. Oh, for the first 2 days of jury selection, Karen Reed introduced herself. The judge seems to have put a stop to that. I personally dislike that call, because I will bet you that Karen Reed introducing herself humanized her, and I don't necessarily think that's a problem for a defendant. They are in this courtroom for their life. I think it is reasonable to allow them to introduce themselves when you're choosing a jury. I think it's also helpful to the attorneys to be able to watch facial expressions and things like that, and it helps them, which is probably why this judge said she couldn't do it anymore. That's just a a complete assumption, pure speculation, and yeah. So, with that, let us go to court and take a look at what this process is at the beginning of each day.
All jurors, please stand. Yay. All persons have any business before the Honorable Beverly County Justice of the Norfolk Superior Court before the County of Norfolk. Join name, your attendance, and you shall be heard. I say the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This court is now open. Jurors remain standing. All of the parties may be seated.
Jurors, could you raise your right hands, please? You solemnly swear to make true answers
Oh,
to such
heavens.
questions as you put forth to you by the court, so help you God.
Easy
Thank
on
you. You
the
can have a seat.
sir.
Judge, may I call the case?
Please.
Judge, this is
Yeah, we're perfect.
2282 CR 117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. Can I have counsel identify themselves for the record, starting with the Commonwealth?
Good morning, Your Honor. Laura McLaughlin for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Ms. McLaughlin.
Adam Lally for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Mr. Lally.
Good morning, Your Honor. Hank Brendan for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Mr. Brennan. Good morning, Mr. Jackson. Good morning, Ms. Little.
Morning, Your Honor. Robert Leslie on behalf of this brief.
Good morning, Mr. Leslie. Good morning, Ms. Giannetti. Good morning. Good morning, Ms. George. Good morning, Ms. Reed. All right, and good morning, jurors. My name's Beverly Canoni. I'm a judge of this court, and I want to welcome you here today and give you some idea on how we think your day will shape up. You're here for impanelment in a criminal case that you've heard, and we appreciate you being here. Jury service is one of the most important civic duties that we have, and we understand that we're taking you away from your families or jobs, and we really appreciate that you're here, ready, willing, and able to serve if you're called upon to do so. And we also appreciate your patience with this proceeding. So this is the case of Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. The Commonwealth alleges that at approximately 6 a.m. on the morning of January 29, 2022, the Canton Police Department received a 911 call reporting an unresponsive male party in the snow outside a residence at 34 Fairview Road in that town. Officers responded and discovered the man, later identified as John O'Keefe, off the roadway in the front lawn area. Officers identified 3 women with Mr. O'Keefe, one of whom was the defendant, Karen Reed, the girlfriend of Mr. O'Keefe. The defendant had been with Mr. O'Keefe the previous evening at 2 different bars in Canton and had driven with him to this residence in the early morning hours of this date. Mr. O'Keefe was treated by paramedics from the Canton Fire Department and transported to the Good Samaritan Medical Center, where he was later pronounced deceased. The Commonwealth alleges that the defendant struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle earlier that morning and then left the scene while Mr. O'Keefe lay injured in the snow during a blizzard. The defendant denies these allegations. She is presumed to be innocent and has pled not guilty.
So I'm going to pause here to say that everything she just read, there was a motion 2 weeks ago, I think it was. That's part of the motion where both sides come together to decide the agreed upon facts of the case. That's what she just read. This is what brings it to trial.
The defendant is charged with second-degree murder. She is also charged with manslaughter while operating under the influence and leaving the scene after causing personal injury or death. I will describe those crimes in greater detail at the end of the case when I teach the juror the law, but briefly, murder is the unlawful killing of a human being. There are various ways in which the Commonwealth can prove a murder case, and the Commonwealth is permitted to proceed under all theories it believes it can prove. Here, the Commonwealth alleges that the defendant committed murder and that that murder was murder in the second degree. In order to prove the defendant guilty of second-degree murder, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Reed committed an unlawful killing and that it was done with malice. In comparison, involuntary manslaughter is an unintentional, unlawful killing caused by wanton or reckless conduct. These terms and the elements of the crimes will be explained to you in detail at the end of the case before you begin your deliberations.
I hope they are explained better than they were in trial number 1.
Now, at the outset, I would like to address the issue of public interest in this case and the duty of this court to adhere to the rule of law. John Adams said that we are a government of laws, not of men, and that the law must be deaf to the clamoring of the public. He meant that while public opinion about a given subject may ebb and flow, The law must be steady, reliable, and even-handed. We know that on the subject of this case, there are people advocating for one outcome or another with intensity, but without the benefit of having heard or seen any evidence at all. The law works in a different way, and the difference is crucial to our system of justice. The jurors selected for this trial will hear and judge the evidence. They will decide what the facts are. Where the evidence is contested, they will determine where the truth lies. Ultimately, the jury will decide whether the Commonwealth has carried its burden of proving that Ms. Reed is guilty of any crime beyond a reasonable doubt.
So the best way I can describe the beyond a reasonable doubt is if you think maybe she did it or probably did it, but you can't be certain. If you're like, I'm like 90 or 95% there, you're not there. It's an acquittal. I will use where I got to with the Murdaugh case, which I also followed, the South Carolina Alex Murdaugh case. There was a point that I got to where there was literally only him that had the ability, that had the weaponry, the ability, the time to do it. Everybody, there was no one else in this very tiny time frame that was able to do it, and therefore that's what got me there. That's beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah, and there's this, given the previous trial, many who have an opinion have seen a fair amount of evidence, and that is also true. Like, we haven't seen the evidences coming into this trial, but we have seen a fair amount of evidence. So I am going to let Judge Bev play Judge Canone. I'm gonna fall into that, and I am sorry. It's an internet thing. But the queen of this household is demanding to be let in. So I am going to do that and let her play.
People outside of this building have rights, and we know that they have voices, but this criminal trial will be decided by an independent jury, free from outside interference, based only upon the evidence presented in this courtroom and the law. This is the only way to ensure that every person who comes before the court receives a fair trial. It is just that simple and that important. So, while public comment will likely continue, the rule of law will be upheld. In order to determine your eligibility to serve on this case, I'm going to ask questions to you all as a group, and then I'm going to ask you to fill out a supplemental questionnaire. We have found that the use of this questionnaire is helpful for several reasons. First, there are some personal questions on it, and we ask that you be candid. In addition, the process of filling out the questionnaire provides the opportunity to be more reflective as you answer the questions, rather than being put on the spot and asked to give immediate answers. After you fill out the questionnaire, we will have you come up to the sidebar one at a time so that we can follow up with you on your answers to the questionnaire and to my questions. I want to thank you in advance for your patience as we go through this process. As you may know, the lawyers for the parties participate in the selection of the jury. Under our law, each of the parties has the right to exercise what we call juror challenges. This means that each party has the right to challenge a certain number of prospective jurors for any reason or for no reason at all. Therefore, some of you may be excused during the impanelment procedure. If you're not selected for jury service on this case, please don't take it personally. Don't think that somehow we think you're not a fair person. It's not a reflection on you at all. You will be directed back to the jury room and perhaps picked on another case later.
Unfortunately, so many of us me and a ton of my coworkers, every now and then some of my coworkers are like, yes, I got summoned for jury duty. Let me get in there. And they get in and then they're like, they come out the end of the day. They didn't pick me. Meanwhile, I know many, many people that share their tips and tricks for not getting seated on a jury. So Judge Canoni is talking to people like me that would be like, but I could be fair and impartial. Not with this case. I would, nope. But other cases, yes.
In a few minutes, I will pose a number of questions to you as a group. You have taken an oath that requires you to truthfully answer those questions and all questions posed to you. If your answer to any question is yes, I will ask that you raise your hand and hold up your juror card in the air with the numbers facing out. You don't need to get your cards out yet. I'll tell you when you can, when we need to have those cards out. So you hold the card up in the air until the court officer can read the number from the card. The fact that you answer yes to one of my questions does not mean that you're automatically disqualified from jury service. It simply means that there are matters that the lawyers and I need to discuss with you at sidebar. If you find a question posed to the group overly intrusive, you may elect to answer that question at sidebar. I will have additional questions for you which relate to issues that may be raised in this trial and are designed to give us more information regarding your ability to serve as a fair and impartial juror, and the lawyers are permitted to ask you questions for the same reason. This is not a test. There is no right or wrong answer. We simply want your best and honest answer to the questions. I'm now going to ask the lawyers to introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask counsel for the defense to introduce their client.
It's that because she introduced herself for 2 days. I'm still not over it. I might not ever get over it.
Starting with the Commonwealth, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hank Brennan. I represent the Commonwealth of Massachusetts along with me, my colleagues.
Good morning, my name is Laura McLaughlin. I'm the Assistant District Attorney for the Norfolk District Attorney's Office. Welcome, good morning, thank you for being here.
Morning, my name is Adam Lally, Assistant District Attorney with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, represent the Commonwealth. Thank you for your time and attention today.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Jackson. I have the honor and privilege to represent Karen Reed, who is standing to my right.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Butler, and I also have the privilege of representing Ms. Reed.
Good morning. Thank you for coming and for your time today. My name is Robert Alessi, and I have the privilege of representing Ms. Reed.
Good morning. My name is David Unetti. I'm an attorney. I have offices in Boston and right here in Dedham. My honor to represent Karen Reed.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I'm Victoria George, and I have the privilege of representing Ms. Reed.
Good morning, I'm Karen Reed. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you all.
That was Karen introducing herself.
Folks, I'm going to read the witness list to you. There are a lot of names on.
Okay, we're not going to listen to the whole witness list. I have to pose the question. If you're catching this on replay, leave the answer in the comments. If you're here with me live, drop it in the chat. I'm curious, if you were a jury, if you were a potential juror, and you saw, what was that, 5 defense attorneys get up to defend Ms. Reed versus the 3 for the Commonwealth, would that make you think one thing or another? Like, would that immediately make you think guilty or innocent, depending on just not the reasons they've all come forward, just the sheer number of them? Because that is more than I've seen in any criminal trial I have ever watched. Like, I'm just curious because if you'd asked me this question 3 months, well, if you'd asked me this question like a year ago, I would probably have questions. I'm not sure what I would think about that. It could go either way for me. But now in a criminal case, if you've got a team that big, either you are that rich or I think I would think of it differently of either you've got to be rolling in a ridiculous amount of money or something is going to come out in evidence that's going to make me think that you're innocent. That's one of the fascinating things about this trial. So I have, let's see. I don't think we definitely don't need to go through the witness list. The judge does explain the schedule and the law. I'm not sure we need that tonight since it is Monday, and I am very grateful for everybody coming with me on this ride. So that is, and I do like how the judge explains. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. My brain is just a pinball tonight. My apologies. I do like how she sets it up for the jury I really like how she describes reasonable doubt and what the burden for the Commonwealth is. But I am curious with all of these folks. Yeah, exactly. That's right. So here's my question with that. If that's a lot of lawyers for a non-celebrity, does it make you lean innocent or does it make you lean guilty? Because yeah, for non-celebrity, that's a good point, Mom. The non-celebrity is another big thing, right? Where if you kind of expect somebody who is in the public eye to have a lot more, right? Because there's at least a perception that probably one or two of them wants in on the publicity. But the publicity is another piece of this, right? When you dig down into the publicity of this trial, the source of everybody paying attention seems to be the defense team. It seems to be that the defense team was like, hey, reporters, you should be looking at this. And a few folks like me last year were like, all right, let's take a look at this. And opening statements hit, and I was like, what? Because Yannetti walked out and went, Karen Reed was framed. So everybody is paying attention at that moment, right? And I started paying, and the longer it went on and the more things happened, the more I was like, what is happening in Canton? And then the internet happened, and the interneted. And basically, it seemed to be once the lawyers of YouTube started watching this case, all bets were off. Everybody was watching it. It was pretty Massachusetts, New England local, and then it just went nationwide. Now people are watching it globally. There are folks in some of the chats I hang out in that are from Ireland or the UK or Australia, and they are riveted by all of this. So yeah, I'm fascinated as to this number. I mean, we on this end, outside of the jury, can sit here and go, how many people raised their hand and said, let me join the defense team, which is not normal from it's not normal. It does not seem to be a thing at all. The people are like, let me hop in and join your defense team. I mean, Victoria George, from what I understand, was an employment lawyer. She's not in the criminal. She's got her law license in Mass, but from what I've read, she was an employment lawyer. For her to be like, for her to raise her hand and say, "Can I hop in on this case?" And now she works for Yannetti's law firm. It seems so. What? Um. Let me go ahead and swoop, and while we swoop, I'm going to look at my notes to see which rabbit hole we are going to go down next. All right. I am going to put this out to the chat, which might just be the folks, but you know what? They're hanging in here for me as mods, and I appreciate that. So let me put this out to the chat before we wrap up for the evening, because we can have story time tonight. So for story time, do we want some of the things that I have discussed about this case, at least at home and with friends, the specifically the Whitey Bulger Hank Brennan Whitey Bulger Irish mob Boston PD rabbit hole that I went down briefly over the last week. We can do that, or we can talk about or I can do a little story time for how I got into watching trials at all, which not surprisingly was the O.J. Simpson case. So, um, let me know in chat if we want to go down the Whitey Bulger Boston Mafia. That no, those words did not go together the way I needed them to go together. Um, yes. So, all right. I've got one vote for the mob story, and we're gonna go with that. Okay. Story time, ladies and gentlemen. Gather round. Gather your cuppa. We will end tonight with a fun little story. It might be twisty and turny because that's how my stories go. So, I er, as Hank Brennan has come into this, I decided I wanted to go on a little bit of a Wikipedia rabbit hole. So we're going to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because Wikipedia, and um, I'm old enough that I take it still with a grain of salt. But up in these parts. So I've lived in Vermont, I have lived in Maine, I have lived in Providence, Rhode Island. Up in these parts, we are all aware, at least in the main Providence, Mass areas, that the old school mafia still exists in the back corners in some places. Up here, we like to think of New York and Chicago and stuff like that. Organized crime is frankly everywhere, but like, yeah, we have pockets. And so the connection between the Irish mob and the Boston PD goes back quite a ways, at least in legend. Given that Hank Brennan was Whitey Bulger's defense attorney, and there's all of these questions about the DA and the Boston PD, Canton PD, and the interconnected. I want to be clear. I am not saying any of these people are a part of that, except maybe Brennan. I might be casting. I have nothing to back it up. These are quite simply my own cockeyed, imaginative leanings. I have no evidence to support this. I could never prove this in a court of law. That's my disclaimer. But I also don't think that you get to be a defense attorney for a top mob boss if you don't have a shaky moral compass in certain areas. It's very hard for me to wrap my head around that somebody would just pick a defense attorney out of a phone book in that position. It's not a part of the stories. And with some of these legends, you go with the legend instead of the other option because one, it's a better story, and two, because the legends have a bad habit of turning out to be correct a lot of the time. So anyway, so I went down this little rabbit hole of, okay, Hank Brennan defended Whitey Bulger. Is that what got him to be called in as a special prosecutor on this case? Because he certainly is acting like a defense attorney for the Commonwealth, which is just bizarre. Well, then I found out that Whitey Bulger ended up, as he was escaping Massachusetts when they finally decided to turn on him, according to Wikipedia, he ended up for at least a brief time with some buddies from the Italian part of the mob in Providence, Rhode Island. And when I read where, I was like, oh, that was my neighborhood. I knew I lived in a mob neighborhood because one, you never saw any cops. And two, it was one of the safest neighborhoods around. Providence, if you live in Providence, if you know Providence, you know that there's a lot of different sections. None of them are the same. There's some weird lines for who lives where and when they've lived there and stuff like that. But when I lived there, mind you, this was 15-ish years ago now. I lived in this little section that is not one of the more well-known areas of that's run by the neighborhood. And let's just there was a restaurant at the end of my street, and folks who didn't live in the neighborhood often would be like, "Oh, have you ever gone to eat there?" I'm like, "No." Why not? It's the best Italian food in your area. I know. It also is the best Italian food in my area in a restaurant that has no windows. I'm not going in because I know the rules. I'm not going in. So, this is that weird connection to all of this. This is probably why I'm paying even more attention because now I will say this for all the organized crime and bad stuff that I don't know why I said bad that way. I'm sorry. I don't know where I was for a minute. All of the negative stuff that they do. There are some interesting positives as well. Like I said, when I was in Providence, fun fact, I got mugged. You know where the mugging happened? Downtown, in the city, where the cops were everywhere. You know what never happened? Anything like that in my neighborhood. Did worse stuff probably happen? Probably. But they kept it in the family, as it were. If you weren't a part of the family, you didn't get looped up in all that stuff. So, going back to Canton and Boston, is there a legendary connection between the Irish leg of that particular group and the Boston and Boston surrounding Boston area police departments? Yes, there is. There is a reason why some of the guys that I used to work with at a campus security job wanted to go be cops in Boston. And others wanted to go be cops other places. Yeah. The ones who wanted to go work in Boston were not my favorite people. Let's just leave it at that. With that, I'm going to start closing it out, but now I'm curious. Are you in New England? Do you have a story similar to that? What legends have you heard? Because now I'm curious. I want to go down this rabbit hole. What rabbit holes have you gone down? Because if you're like me, this is a thread I'm going to pull at, and I'm going to just see what comes out. Because now I'm just curious and I want more information and I want to find all of the connections because there are too many connections in too many weird ways. So I'm going to go down that rabbit hole. And you know what? You're going to come with me on some level. You're going to come with me because you're here and we're hanging out. And so with that, what rabbit hole are you going down with this? What has your interest piqued? What has you sitting there asking all of the questions of? What are your questions? Because now I'm super curious. And so at some point in the middle of all this, we just need to do a stream that is us following all of the odd questions. So please drop those in the comments. Drop them in the chat when we're chatting. I am super fascinated. We are going to keep an eye on this. Let us see if Peter Tragos is correct. I am curious. Peter Tragos is pegging April 14th for opening statements. We don't know yet because we have to seat and swear the whole jury. He's thinking April 14th. I am kind of thinking the same. I would be, but who knows? Nobody got sat today, but tomorrow they could seat the rest and then we're off to the races. So I I don't know. And I appreciate you guys being here with me. I'm going to keep coming back to catch up on wherever we are at in trial when I can. I just ask that you have a little bit of patience with me while I am, taking care of my health because I need to do that. So, um, I don't know if I'll be back next week. We might have a full week off. I might be bored and able to sit in a chair for an hour. We don't know. I will post one way or another, or I will have somebody post on my behalf. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me on this ride. Um, let me know what thoughts you have. Let me know what you are thinking with this. Let me know what we want to chat about if we're gonna do another bonus stream like this. I had one more thing and it is gone, so I am going to say stay safe and be well. Do good. And I need to pull up my outro. Almost forgot that. Okay. Let's try that again, shall we? Stay safe, be well, do good, and remember to bark a lot, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Unfiltered Tea. Don't forget to hit that like button. If you have a story you want our unfiltered take on, go ahead and drop it in the comments, and we will see you next time.